Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Jenny Womack, Associate Director of North Carolina State University and your N4A Division Director of Educational Services and Initiatives. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Before we get started, the virtual education team wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the recent passing of our colleague, Dr. Christina Navarro-Krupka, and her daughter, Karina Maria. Christina was a trailblazer in our field and a mentor, colleague, and friend to many. Please continue to keep her and her family, friends, and community in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you. I'm excited to welcome you to today's conversation titled Reimagining Student Success in the Generative AI Era, the first in a two-part webinar series around the use of AI in the world of student-athlete support services. Today, we will embark on a journey exploring the transformative impact of generative AI in the areas related to student utilization. Our expert panel will dissect how AI is reshaping the student experience, guiding and providing academic support, and the ethical considerations. Engage with us as we navigate the complexities of educating student athletes, ensuring equity, integrity, and success. Get ready for a dynamic roundtable discussion. Our virtual education team, including Zach, Emily, Karina, JP, and Maureen, is excited that you've chosen to attend today, and we would like to thank the N4A leadership for continuing to support the holistic growth of N4A practitioners. Next, I will turn it over to Zach to introduce a helper who can get the presentation underway.
Hello. I am Chaz, an avatar developed to showcase a potential use of generative AI in presenting. My role today is to break the ice and introduce the outstanding panelists and moderators for your presentation. I was created for free and scripted in minutes using Vidnos, though my free version can only be 3 minutes total in length and is capped at 2,000 characters per slide, LOL. Let's meet your featured presenters. Claude E. P. Mayo is the Director of Academic Integrity and Pre-Law Advisor at Quinnipiac University. He oversees the Office of Academic Integrity's work to provide strong advocacy, actionable education, and consistent enforcement. This has manifested in campus initiatives to increase the academic preparation of underrepresented student populations, the exploration of teaching and learning exercises that aid in more integral practice, and increasing the number of campus community members involved in academic integrity service. Tamsin Adams is a current OSU student athlete for the men's rowing team where she competes as a coxswain. She is completing a year-long placement in compliance as part of the OSU Athletics Internship Program through Student Athlete Development, and is one of 3 student athletes selected to the year-long athletics position. She is a sophomore originally from Pennsylvania. Kathleen Crosby is a learning specialist with the Academic Support Program for Student Athletes at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She holds a PhD in English from the University of North Carolina, a master's degree in English, and a master's in English education. She teaches English and education courses at the university level, and her research interests include retention and persistence, student success, and writing pedagogy. Rich Thompson is the founder and CEO of Podium X and has over 28 years of experience in staffing, recruiting, talent management, HR, and leadership development with extensive work with coaching athletes in transition. Podium X is a comprehensive set of tools that supports each student athlete, current and alumni, throughout the career recruitment process, plus a fully functioning personal branding and marketing tool used by the student for NIL opportunities. It boasts an auto resume writer and customized elevator pitch, among other tools, and is entrusted by athletes from over 371 schools and organizations. There are also 2 outstanding practitioners guiding today's roundtable discussion. Maureen Tremblay serves as the Assistant Athletic Director for Student Athlete Development at Oregon State University and oversees programming related to the holistic student-athlete experience, including professional preparation, leadership development, community engagement and service, and NIL opportunities. A former OSU student athlete, she returned to her alma mater in January 2023. Jenna Polk has served Sacramento State for the past 6 years as the football academic advisor. In addition, she coordinates the admission and academic evaluation of all incoming student athletes and serves N4A as the chair of the Academic Programs and Practices Committee. Jenna and Maureen, let's get the conversation going.
Yes, thank you, Chaz, for those introductions. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I am Jenna Paul. Let's get this conversation going and start by getting an idea of who is in our audience today with the poll. You should see the poll coming up on your screen momentarily, and we will give you a moment to respond, about a minute. And once again, thank you for being here. Hey, thank you for your answers. I think everybody should be able to see the feedback. It looks like some of us are in that integrity nightmare phase of AI. Some of us are really excited, seem to be about exploring what the possibilities are. Some of us are a little lost, and that's fine as well. It looks like I think the conversation around AI has been evolving since the beginning of the year. I know it is happening a lot at the institution that I am at. All right, and then the policy, it is a mixed bag, it looks like. Some of us are hearing about it and talking about it. Some of us aren't sure what the policy is, which is interesting. And then it looks like we have a lot of learning specialists and academic advisors here today. So once again, thank you for showing up today and for your feedback there. All right, so as a reminder, as we get into the panel, you can kind of help drive this conversation for this webinar by using the Q&A feature within your Zoom platform. We'll add your questions throughout the conversation, and then we have some time set aside at the end for some concluding thoughts. So now I will turn it over to Maureen to kind of kickstart our panel.
All right, thanks, Jenna. Again, I'm Maureen Tremblay. I'm the Assistant Athletic Director for Student Athlete Development at Oregon State University, and we're excited to welcome our panelists here today to discuss the topic of student success and the impacts of generative AI. We're going to dive deeper into how student athletes are interacting with AI in academics, how it is advancing resources and opportunities in career and student athlete development, and then what considerations exist for ethics, equity, and academic integrity. But to start, I want to provide a definition for generative AI so we can begin with an understanding of the terminology. It was fitting when I logged into my computer this morning, Bing prompted me to learn more about AI with an article called The 10 AI Terms Everyone Should Know. So from Microsoft Bing, they define generative AI as leveraging the power of large language modules to make new things, not just regurgitate or provide information about existing things. It learns patterns, structures, and then generates something that is similar but new. It can make things like pictures, music, text, videos, and code. It can be used to create art, write stories, and design products. A few other terms to be aware of is machine learning, which is how AI is generated through computer platforms. Prompts, which are the instructions that one would enter into the system for an AI task to be performed. And then responsible AI, which is the attempt to make AI more safe and more fair. So now that we have common language to use, I will start off the conversation by asking each panelist to describe how you interface with AI and what that looks like in your role. So we'll start with Dr. Kathleen Crosby. Could you briefly state your current position and how you interface with artificial intelligence in your role?
Thanks, Maureen, for those definitions. I'm a learning specialist within an academic support program for student athletes. So I'm thinking about generative AI, both at the macro level and the micro level. So first, I'm thinking about the university, what its policies are, and what that might mean for my students as they navigate that space. Then I'm thinking about classrooms. How is AI centered there? Is it in course instruction, assignment design, assignment assessment? Finally, I'm also thinking about our students and how, when, and why they might be turning to AI platforms, and whether that's within the framework of a class in which it's AI driven or they're just looking for AI aid in an assignment. And I also want to think about the future. What are we going to do in terms of talking about students with ChatGPT, its various iterations, our tutors, and our staff?
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Tamsin for an introduction.
I'm a current student athlete at Oregon State, as well as an intern in the athletics compliance department. I would say that I use AI every day. I use it academically and professionally. It gives me feedback on assignments. It helps me to organize as well as summarize information. It gets me information when I need it for assignments, and it helps to edit my writing and work for both academics and my job.
Awesome, thank you. Rich?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. I'm the founder and CEO of Podium X, and we've hit head on the age-old problem of resume creation, but also all of the other tools that are necessary for student athletes to get themselves to market, to showcase their experience and kind of overcome the lack of traditional professional experience. So we help them identify transferable skills and the soft skills that resumes typically don't. The use of AI in Podium X is for the podium creation. So think of it like a LinkedIn with personality, but showcasing the athletic experience. And the AI is optimized all the way through. So podium creation to a cover letter optimization, to an elevator pitch, interview prep questions, as well as a thank you note. So all those things that are typically really difficult for the student athlete and tends to drag and kind of be a burden on the athletic department resources has become easy by the use of AI.
Thank you, Rich. And last but not least, Dr. Claude Mayo.
Excuse me. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Claude Mayo. I'm the Director of Academic Integrity at Quinnipiac University in Connecticut. And the majority of my AI experience comes from trying to chase students down when they're using it inappropriately. Of course, we have an academic integrity policy that really sort of pursues students doing their own work and being righteous in doing so. So we've seen artificial intelligence show up on our campus as a way to sort of skirt or curtail some of the things that the expectations that we have. So we'll surely talk about throughout the day, but a lot of my work and thought goes into where is it acceptable, because we don't want to be bright line rule against it, but how is it introduced and incorporated into the academic work here in order to still provide opportunities for real learning.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists, for being here. Claude, and kind of building off of your experience there, what is artificial intelligence? So we hear that term a lot now. What is intelligence, and maybe what makes it artificial? So maybe if you could break it down for us, that would be great.
That's a great question. I go into a lot of talks here on campus, and we talk about the difference between artificial and natural intelligence. Natural intelligence is, of course, what we as educators want to make sure that our students know they are endowed with. Those are the things that your faculty members want to see, that your parents want to know you have, that you as students want to feel good about yourselves. The natural intelligence is anything that you create, you design, you develop, things that you work with, anything that has just that unique stamp of you on it, so that somebody else couldn't put it out the exact same way. When we look at the artificial intelligence, and what we're warning our students about is the things that create so much of a product that you don't necessarily, you aren't in there. What it does is it creates sort of a ready-made, I'll call it, sort of a prefabricated answer for you, a prefabricated scenario, prefabricated piece that you're willing to submit and sort of just take credit as if it was yours. As I said before, we're not totally against the use of artificial intelligence, something that's going to give you sort of somewhat of a finished product. But we are educating students around the things that you need to do if you are to incorporate the things that you need to do to it in order to make it yours. So having some sort of transformative value input from your own natural intelligence that shifts the artificial into something else.
Thank you, Claude. We appreciate the overview of AI, and I want to turn it over to Tamsin to give us the student perspective. So if you could describe for us, what experiences have you had with AI, both in the classroom, and then can you speak to how you might use it for assignments or things that your professors have given you to work on?
So over the last year, I think AI has become something in the classroom that is discussed. Ending last year, most professors didn't talk about it, and if they did, they just said don't use it. Now I can say, starting the term off, I read my syllabuses, and every single professor had their own take on it and how it would be used and how it wouldn't be used. Almost every professor, I think, had something in there referring to make sure you cite. Your ideas do still need to be your own, and your assignments can't be completely AI generated. Mainly that would mean that you can use it to get information as long as you cite. So if I'm Googling someone's birthday, I can ask AI, like, when were they born, where were they born? Personally, if I use that information, I do always fact check it again because it can provide you incorrect information, which I think is really important for students to understand. And as long as you cite that, you do not turn it into a completely AI generated essay. So my essay can't be completely written from start to finish by a computer program. So long as I use it to gather information, fact check myself, check my grammar, my structures, my flow, something like that can be turned in as my own. And I cite that I used it and I cite that it gave me aid in using it as opposed to completing my work for me, which would not be my own. And I think the culture's definitely shifted in teachers understanding students will use it and it's a great tool, but it is not a finished product and nor should it be treated like that.
Perfect, thank you. And then you spoke of some AI platforms. Would you be able to talk about what things you have used in terms of AI that you find specifically useful? And then can you relate it to what you may have been using in compliance in your internship and how that has applied to your professional side as well?
So I think the most commonly used would be ChatGPT, which I think most people have heard of, mainly in the sense of it writes people's essays for them. I found it's really helpful for me. It summarizes information. If I don't really understand a concept or something in a textbook, I can ask it for essentially a very pared down explanation along with examples. And I've used that a lot of times to understand homework, specifically math or science concepts I don't understand, or a term or a phrase a teacher uses that I can't quite grasp on my own. So ChatGPT has been great for that. It's also great for you giving it information and then it being able to provide you a well-written explanation of what you want that you can kind of go off of and say, oh, that's something that I want to now try to emulate in my writing. I also think there's apps like Quillbot or Grammarly, which Grammarly's been around for a while, and I think most know about that. Those are very driven in changing your grammar, your sentence structures, making sure that you have all your commas, making sure you're using active instead of passive voice in your essays. And I would say that I use those most frequently to edit down essays, edit down my discussion posts, and make sure that when I'm turning something in, I'm not losing 3 points on a mistake because I don't have commas in the right places or my sentences are all run-ons, which definitely affects your grade. And it's something that is so easy to go over if you have the time to do it. In compliance, I've used ChatGPT most recently to make an website for us. And I basically did all the research myself. I told it exactly what I wanted, and it gave me information and it helped me kind of put it into a format that was usable for a website and was really well done and written without me having to spend hours trying to find the right words, find exactly how I wanted to put the information together.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And I have to thank Tamsin for her time. She's about to run off for a final exam in about 8 minutes. So good luck. And thanks for giving your perspective to us as a student athlete and an intern. So thank you, Tamsin. And I'll pass it
so much.
Awesome. I'll pass it to Jenna for the next question.
Thank you, Tamsin, as well, and good luck on your final. All right, so kind of based on that student perspective, I would like to kind of throw it to Claude and kind of ask you, what ways are you discussing and educating student athletes on the use of AI? How would you kind of educate Tamsin, as you have, as she would say? What strategies are you seeing in academic uses?
You know, I think Tamsin was right on the money with the way that she's doing it. She realizes what she gets in using AI. She gets a great summary. She gets sort of a foundational understanding of a topic, even a structure or a structurally sound and good looking version of what the right answer is. It's just not her answer. And I think that she realized that, and so says, she uses that as a start, but then begins to work from there. She understands that her process begins there. And so that's some of the strategies that we're giving to faculty and students around here. AI could effectively be the new Wikipedia. How all of us have thought we didn't know much about a topic, and so we went to Wikipedia, looked it up, and we read there, and then we said, oh, okay, I get that much, and now we can start sort of our more in-depth exploration. We can use generative AI in very much that same way. It can give you a solid basis. It can give you a start, but knowing that you have to sort of continue to work. And so we're working with faculty a lot to do a lot of scaffolded essays, where even if they start out and have their students, they use generative AI to create the first draft of the entire essay. Then say the second step to be actually critiquing that essay, and a third step to rewriting that essay that's going to strengthen the areas that you found the weaknesses and the challenges before. With students, we're telling them that, yeah, you can read the Wikipedia page, but you can also go to a generative AI, which might be a little bit more updated, pull from a broader base of knowledge, and use it to get some understandings. But then your work can begin as you start the gaps, you sort of reflect on what you learned in class, what you had in conversation, which of course the generative AI is not going to know. The different experiences, the different labs, or the different pieces of the other resources that you've seen, and begin with a critique of the AI first, and then you can sort of use that to start to fill in your gaps and really build from there. So I think Tamsin was right on point. It falls a lot of line with what we're doing here.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mayo. I agree. I think having the language, right? I can't take credit for this language, but it's AI aided kind of almost versus AI driven work. So when it's used as a tool, we're finding it helpful, but maybe when it's creating the entire assignment for them, that's where we're running into problems. So Dr. Crosby, same question to you. How are you discussing and educating student athletes from the instructor perspective and learning specialist perspective, and what strategies are you seeing with your students?
I'll start with some of the points that Tamsin brought up for us, and then return to something Dr. Mayo said for us to think through. So I think some of those basic strategies of like how to approach classes is something that underpins it. We know across universities, there's different policies. We know within classes, there are different policies. I know even for some of my own students within classes, there are different policies depending on the assignment in terms of what form of AI, if you can use it at all. And I think helping students sort of begin to manage and navigate that landscape is the first step, because it's sort of always hard when there are changing expectations across the university for them to always know what's at stake is something we want to make sure we're scaffolding. And then thinking about them, assuming that have students been afforded the opportunity to use AI or not within a first year class, and then the next year they're asked to do so. So how do I sort of think about the skill building and the scaffolding of things my students are doing? I'm thinking though, as well as with a background in English ed and writing instruction, the idea of like, what does it mean to like not let it think for you, but to help you think, and the ways in which we help students build critical reading and writing strategies. It's the easy sort of response to just have it generate, but to sort of look at that draft it gives me and to think critically about, is that sentence structure better? Or how can I bring my evidence to bear, is something that we as academic support professionals and as instructors in classrooms can be thinking about, because that's a different kind of critical expertise we're asking students to do. And it's a harder work, and it's harder work for us to sort of think about too. So the ways in which we're talking about language and writing in particular is something that we may want to give future consideration to within our profession.
Awesome, thank you. And one area that I know that it's been helpful for students that may have that initial writer's block to kind of get them going, to maybe get them pointed in the right direction and just writing something. I know some of these AI tools have been useful for that. So, all right. So Kathleen, kind of kicking it back to you. Let's now talk about what are the risks of using AI in the academic space. I know obviously plagiarism is one of them. How do you suggest maybe approaching students who are using it when they shouldn't be? And how do we discourage improper use of AI?
Okay. So I think the first question, and clearly the poll showed us that, is the risk is always at first that academic integrity issue, the potential to put your name on top of a document of something that you haven't written, that you just had a bot generate, and you want to know what university policies are, department policies, classrooms, and the like. I think there's one other risk we want to talk about too, as we think about developing our students academically and athletically and personally, is instilling our students with the idea of that they have natural intelligence, to quote Dr. Mayo, if you will, that for them to somehow think that something else or someone else can write something better than they can, that they don't yet know the steps of like what college success looks like, that they don't necessarily have the time for it. And I think that's a complicated space because it's tied up with equity, right? Because whatever's generated is coming along predictive language models, which tends to be sort of based on Eurocentric models of language. And so I really want to center my students' voices and for them to believe in their voices and not to lose that sort of multitude of expression. So I think if I have a student in front of me who maybe it's questionable about whether they have used generative AI, and we can run that into sort of realms. So it looks sort of what people would describe as this chat GPT-esque kind of paper. It sounds a little robotic. It's rather repetitive, right? The text doesn't make the connections that they do. And so maybe I want to start by having that conversation about like, is this paper doing the work it should be and why or why not? And we can talk about the prompt, and we can talk about like the class expectations, and we can talk about like the analytical work in terms of it. I mean, I think I'm really someone who's good at relationship building, so I don't have any problem saying to a student that I'm working with on a continual basis that this doesn't look like something you've written, and can we talk about why and what that looks like? And I think also too in like smaller assignments such as Tamsin mentioned Quillbot, right? I can put a small sentence phrase and it can rephrase it. It can sophisticate it for me or the like. If I see a student who's sort of that's their default, maybe I want to talk about what is the difference between those two texts and which sounds better and why. And I kind of want to build those critical reading and writing strategies so they feel more confident to kind of like think about my professor can or does allow me to use it for brainstorming. But do I just accept what it brainstorms, or do I think back and talk about whether that makes sense and what I wanted to argue? So I think those are some of the starting points for me in terms of what I'm thinking when I'm talking about students in those spaces.
Yeah, I agree. Like empowering them that they do have the capability to do that themselves and their own ideas are good is important when talking with students about AI. Dr. Mayo, what about you? What do you think some of the risks that you see with AI in the academic space? And how do you suggest approaching students who, or how have you talked to students who have used it and are trying to discourage its use?
Certainly. I think the biggest risk, and I don't want to be too doom and gloom, is just the loss of student learning. Anyone that uses AI to generate an assignment that they submit and doesn't put actually their own natural intelligence into it is really losing that opportunity to sort of further their ideas, further the content, further the exchange with the faculty member or their community that they're learning in. And so, AI sort of puts those kind of things, I think, very much at risk. I think that there are sort of some tangential pieces to that, and sort of how it breaks down the exchanges that happen in classrooms and things like that. As I said, the exchange is happening between the student and the faculty member, right? They're not able to sort of share their ideas in such a way that faculty members are now able to gain and pull them out and extract them into the community, into the discussion space there. All of those things are a threat or can go wrong. As I talk to students that have been accused of and maybe even have violated a policy around this, I'm usually pointing at many of the things that caused them to do cheating prior to AI. When we saw plagiarism, when we saw cheating, it was often time management issues. It was often sort of the stress of the expectations of being able to succeed. It's often not understanding assignments. It wasn't necessarily always just trying to beat the system for beating the system's sake, but often it was around some other aspect of learning that the student wasn't able to sort of capitalize on or be able to be successful in. And so therefore they needed to turn to a quick alternative, something that was sort of going to get them by. And I think those same things sort of happen here as we talk to students. We say, yeah, this is going to save you a bit of time if you just type in your prompt and you submit the paper, hand it in. But then you're also going to run that risk. What we're asking you to do and the ways that we're asking you to use AI as a summary, as a foundation, as a starting point, requires you to still invest more time in order to build upon it, to change it, to think about what makes it more naturally you rather than the machine learning, the machine talking through it. And working with their faculty members to sort of build that in, as I said, sort of structured assignments and where they're scaffolding towards places, or really sort of pulling from things that are happening in class, in the experience, is going to help defray a lot of students from being in that space as well.
Thank you both for those thoughts. And Dr. Mayo, I appreciate the forward-thinking perspective of how can we continue to integrate it into learning. And so we're not just using machine learning, but actually using it to enhance our students' learning, which I think is really important. So we're going to move away from the academic side for a moment and think more long-term professional into the future careers. So this question for Rich. When we're thinking outside of academia, how in your position have you seen students use generative AI to better prepare for the rapidly changing job market and to use it in a professional context?
Yeah, so look, it's a great question. And it's, the funny thing is, and I've been in the staffing, recruiting, and HR space for a long time, and I used to run a big talent acquisition team. And when we ran that team and we were looking and screening candidates, we used AI to screen people out, right? So AI has been around from a filtering perspective for a long time. What we've decided, again, because of that experience and because of that intel, is let's use inside of Podium X to help the athlete get screened in. And what I mean by that are most ATS systems that are attached to job boards or to corporate screening processes are using keywords to help identify not just source, but also screen candidates for interviews. Most of those words that are sitting on those job descriptions, unfortunately, are not sitting on the resume of a student athlete, because we all know the student athlete has a lot of great experience, but they don't have the traditional professional experience. And, in the work that we've done, and we've placed hundreds of athletes in the past few years, is we just felt like we had too many athletes that are amazing and are, could really be great employees. They just don't ever get the chance, right? So their resume is either getting screened out or their resume is not even being looked at. Well, for sure, though, the resume is not telling the story. So, it was, I think Jenna used the idea of aided versus driven, and that's really how we use AI, right? So we are just helping the athlete construct and tell their story in an interesting way that makes them noticed, highlights their, unique skills, their transferable skills, their soft skills, to just try to get them the interview. And once they do secure the interview, now let's use, again, kind of the reverse ATS business, right? The reverse applicant tracking system, and extract the keywords off of the job description, incorporate that throughout the process so that they can go and just be awesome in the interview. And so AI is really important, I think, as it relates to outside of academia, the use of job boards, the use of kind of flanking applicant tracking, automatic filtering systems, and really highlighting the athlete's story in a much more way, or in a much better way, that is beyond the resume build. Because a resume standalone, and even LinkedIn, which is just a digital version of the resume, doesn't appear, at least what we're hearing, but also what the hiring managers are saying or telling us, is it's just not enough. What they're most interested in is likability, personality, and are they going to be a good fit?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think being able to combine the use of AI to help our student athletes in the future? I know I've used ChatGPT to help some students try to write bullet points on their resume, but I know that you're looking at it from an even broader perspective. So from that high level view, what trends do you expect to see in the way that AI continues to be used in the student athlete development space to enhance the student experience? So if you had to predict, what trends do you think we would continue to see in this area?
Well, and I think that there needs to be, and you know, I've said before, we work with a lot of different schools, and I think that it's been said on this is not all schools have the same policy. They all have kind of a different view. I think it's going to be the embracing of AI because, you know, not for the purpose of completing an assignment or doing work for me, but helping me identify my story and get to market better. And so I think it's going to be more widely used. I mean, I've got friends who are general counsels of Fortune 500 companies. Okay, so legal documents that are using AIs as starter kits. And I just think it's going to be, you know, a lot more acceptable if, again, if used right, to help the athletes, you know, get to market. Because, you know, not only now, because listen, athletes hate writing resumes because it's hard, right? And typically if they don't write their own, then it falls onto someone inside of the athletic department to try to help them do that. And I've been in offices where, you know, the athlete walks in with a blank Word doc and it's like, all right, let's go. And it's like, oh my gosh, you know, how do we start from there? So the use of the AI, again, through how we're using it, saves everybody a lot of time. So it's better confidence in the story, but it's also a lot of time saved from an athletic, you know, department perspective. And I just think that the use of that through that recruitment process, in using those marketing tools will be a lot better, a lot easier.
Thank you, Rich. And you had a quick question, I think, in the Q&A that if you could answer quickly, if you know. The question was, how has AI been used to sort out candidates that have a DEI or non-majority identity on their resume? And what can we do to help student athletes that have involvement in Black Student Union or student athletes of color, international student athlete focus groups from being weeded out?
Tough question. Short answer, I don't know. The longer answer is I hope that that's not the case, because that from an old chief HR officer perspective, which is my old job, I would be very worried about electronic or auto screening devices as it's related to sorting candidates outside of just skill and competency.
Great, thank you. And thank you for that question. All right, let's see here. All right, so throw it to Kathleen. So as a learning specialist, what role do you believe AI is going to play in adapting educational content to different and individual like learning styles and preferences? How can we use it to kind of, like I said, once again, guide students based on their learning style?
I think within the educational field that AI has potential for helping students grow across all of those different learning styles. We'll eventually move perhaps to determining personalized learning systems, to maybe AI-assisted tutorial systems, thinking about like content generation, maybe even gamified learning and responsive kind of design as well. At this level we're at currently, as it's always sort of changing, we do have some moments where we can ask AI to put some of the processes of learning in students' own hands, to explain concepts at a level that they can understand, to maybe build iterative questions based on their own private knowledge, to offer them accessibility tools that can meet them where they are. I think we as academic support professionals probably still have to think really deeply about the ethical choices that those possibilities can have within our policies and practices. But there's definitely avenues for students to think about the ways in which they learn, and the ways in which it can affect like access, equity, and conclusion. And sort of, I think a second level for us to think about too is that not everyone enters our space at the same level in terms of technology, in terms of education. And so to think about who's had access to broadband internet and whose high school classrooms embedded AI practices and who sort of kept them away. And then who in our own classrooms are getting instructions about that. And even for us, like, are there professional development opportunities for us to learn how to support students in AI and instructors, right? That takes time and that takes money. And so I think today in the virtual ed panel that you all have put on, and thanks to N4A, is a great step for us all beginning that sort of training and conversation together, because I think we all have questions about how to do it and how to do it better. And so I think for our students and for ourselves, it can be different spaces of entry and learning.
I think that's a really important piece. This is a starting point. So just to reiterate what Dr. Crosby said, thank you all for being here. I think it's a great place to start that conversation, and then to continue to grow and learn as we all are in this space. So a question for Dr. Mayo. In what ways do you think the definition of student success has evolved with the advent of generative AI?
I think that's a great question because I think it definitely has evolved, and I don't think it's evolved in a good way or a bad way. I think it's just a different way. We're just going to end up asking our students to do different things. I mean, school and higher ed is all about learning the skills that are going to make you productive members of the workforce down the road. And so now, as we're integrating AI into our classrooms, what we're basically saying to students is that you're going to have this AI technology available to you in different workplaces and work settings, and we need you to know how to use it. It was sort of like when they invented the calculator. It didn't get rid of math; it just changed the ability of people to do math more quickly, and probably brought math to more people. It allowed some different sort of nuances from that standpoint. And so I anticipate AI is going to do the same. Students are not going to have to do as much writing of the letters or the emails or the documents that they're coming up with, but they're still going to need to know to understand which is the right one to use, what it really needs to say, how it needs to be tailored in specific situations. And so they'll be able to, we've given them the equation effectively that a calculator will help them with. Sorry, we've given them the tools, the skills to build it, but we haven't given them the equation. You gave the calculator, which will let you do the simple math operations, but it doesn't necessarily tell you how to get from start to end. And so AI is a vehicle that we can drive as long as they're driving it correctly.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mayo. I think critical thinking skills are going to be more important than ever with the use of AI, because I don't foresee it going anywhere, but the ability to critically think and still come up with your own ideas and implications is going to be super important. So thank you. All right, so before I get into the Q&A questions, I want to encourage you to kind of go ahead and submit more questions to the Q&A for our panel if you have them, because I will start kind of going through there and seeing what we have. So let's see here. This one is for Rich. How will over-relying on AI dumb down or set our student athletes back in the job field, or do you think that is a possibility?
Yeah, so look, I'm old and I had a hard time with it at first. I mean, because I had to write my resume. I was a student athlete from a long time ago. And the process, I mean, it can be argued that the process of going through trying to write a resume, there's learning in that for sure. But it's, I've come around. I mean, we've had AI on the site now for a little over a year. And the reality is that even when I left my last job, I went out to someone to help me write my resume. It's not like I couldn't do it myself. I just needed a different perspective. I needed some help. I just didn't like the idea that, there were, as I said earlier, very quite capable, excellent employees that just weren't even getting a shot because they couldn't construct a good resume or they couldn't tell their story. And let's also remember that the things that we do, at least in Podium X, resume creation, cover letter, all that stuff, they still have to go in the interview and be awesome, right? So no one's going to get a job because of a resume, right? So they're only going to get an interview. So why would we hamper, right, the opportunity for greater opportunities and keeping them from getting resume or getting interviews simply because they can't, construct a resume very well? So I've come around, but I get the question, but to me, it's just like, look, we're just providing more opportunities for them, but they still have to go and earn the job.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like the resume is just one piece of the puzzle, and they still have to have those interview skills and those people skills and those networking skills that AI can't generate. So it's definitely just trying to help them get into the door. So we appreciate your technology there at Podium X and what you're trying to do for our student athletes. All right, I'm going to pull another Q&A question here. Let's see. Let's see, regarding, let's see, this is for Dr. Mayo, regarding AI and setting policies around the use of it, where do you feel the responsibility lies in setting policies around it? Is it faculty, institution, or should athletics, academic support set a policy?
So I'd say, because AI in this area is so new and institutional types are so different, it's going to be all over the board. Where we are and what my personal preference is that we, as a whole, have made a statement from our academic integrity office that says we understand this thing is here. It's changing the way that learning is going to happen. It's going to change the way that the things that you're actually asked to learn. And so that we're going to point towards our faculty members to help guide you through doing that. We want to make sure that faculty members are seen as the authority in all their classrooms. They have the academic freedom to program and to create their curriculum around what they think is most important in their industry, in their specific fields, in their specific course. And so we've said, you can use AI to the extent that they want, but if they said it's out, then it's out. In our particular policy here on campus, all of our AI violations have been challenged under a part of our policy that points at the possession or use of unauthorized devices or materials. That's the same thing that happens if a student gets an old paper copy of the Cliff Notes that I don't know if students get anywhere anymore. But it's just an unauthorized material. What we're really looking to is, like I said, the faculty member being the authority and really defining the limits of what comes in and outside of the classroom. And so I don't believe that the institution needs to make a broad-based statement because it's going to affect engineering differently than it will affect history, and it will affect your biological sciences differently. Again, I would really put as much power as possible in the authority of every faculty member in each classroom.
Thank you for that. And to dive in a little bit deeper into the classroom perspective, Dr. Crosby, we got several questions related to enthusiasm of students. How do you keep student athletes engaged when AI seems to be an easy tool to reach to? How do you discuss with a student when you might expect them to have used AI? And then really like the critical thinking skills piece. How do we continue to teach critical thinking even when AI is easy to use?
Yes, Maureen, a ton of great questions, right? Not sure I'm going to do justice to all of them, but I think all of them raise to the point that like higher ed and where are we at this moment, and where are we sort of like post 2020 even in terms of classroom engagement and what that means. And I think let's take the first question. I think there's a questioning on behalf of instructors and professors, just in terms of in what ways do my discipline matter, and what is important and crucial to my discipline, and how do I engage students in those spaces? And so if I think about writing, like what is it important for my students to voice and say, and how do I create assignments that allow them to do so? So maybe there's less need for a particular type of writing that can be generated easily on ChatGPT, and maybe there's move towards something that's more personal, more narrative based, more exploratory, more imaginative, that asks students to start where they are and kind of develop through that. So I think it first comes through like course assignment design. It's also going to come in terms of course outcomes, and what do I want my students to take away? What do I want them to be able to generate and think through? Maybe it's about different courses I offer in terms of philosophy, in terms of like computer sciences, and what I'm sort of doing in this space in terms of AI. And I think too, in terms of what we're asking disciplines to do, I think by nature, we all are inquisitive people who want to learn and develop in the world. Sometimes we need support in terms of figuring out those pathways. And I think that's what good classrooms can do and good academic spaces can do as well. So I think by centering the idea of critical thinking, by thinking about ways in which we can encourage our students to build their voice and celebrate voice and think about new ways to approach assignments, then those are some of at least the starting places to engage and inspire, and rather to just assume assignments are always just getting through assignments, which we know that sometimes in time crunches they feel like, but in what way can I help create meaning? And hopefully that's all of us in higher ed working towards that.
Thank you. And, I know in conversations I've had with students who I know who have used it, I try not to be demeaning, or just, put them down if they've used it, and talk more of like, okay, why did you use this? How do we prepare better next time? What is maybe a more appropriate way of using it? And then also navigating them if they did get in trouble, like navigating them through that process and just kind of being once again, an advisor, a resource as they navigate their collegiate journey. So thank you so much for being here. I would like to just go ahead and ask if you have any final comments before we conclude today. Feel free to jump in if you have any final closing thoughts. Dr. Crosby, you want to start if you have any final thoughts?
We can't deny the fact that our students are going to walk into workplaces where AI is part of the landscape, and they'll be asked to do, produce, create within that framework. And so I think we want to create situations where we are allowing them to explore and consider that, always within the framework of ethical considerations, always within the framework of human intelligence, which is what we sort of started off with, and sort of celebrating where they are. So always being able to strike the balance from what the world might look like in the future, as well as what you're responsible to in the moment. And I think beginning those conversations are really important ones to have throughout a semester and throughout an academic year. Those are my first thoughts.
Thanks, Rich. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, real quick. I mean, I think like with anything else, is it just comes down to intent. I mean, if there's a tool out there like AI and it's, if it's used with proper intention, and in our case, it's used to help them get to market, help them be able to sell their story, help them, gain more opportunities, then it ought to be fine. I'm no academic person. I'm not a teacher by any stretch, but I just think that, we can embrace it as long as everybody just intends to use it the proper way and for all the right reasons. And, I think, that was said just a minute ago, is it's here to stay. And so let's just try to figure out, how to work within the landscape and help these guys get really good at it.
Great, thanks, Rich. And before I throw it to Dr. Mayo for his last thoughts, just if we didn't get to your Q&A, there will be a part 2 in January, and we will be writing all your questions down. So don't go anywhere. So Dr. Mayo, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess from the academic integrity side, I like to share with everyone that my office and all of the offices that exist in higher ed that focus on my work, enforcement is probably just one part of what we do. The two other legs of our stool are advocacy and education. And I truly believe if we go out and we talk about how important the academic integrity, the academic community is, and helping to preserve that, and then also educate around how to not violate academic integrity, how to have the skills and really sort of enrich oneself to not run into these problems, then we have to do very little enforcement. With AI coming, a lot of people are probably looking at us just to stop it, find out how to detect it, how to get it out of our classrooms. But if we do the advocacy to talk about, hey, this can have a value for us, and how do we work it in? How do we educate around how to have productive uses of it? I think we're going to have a much happier time going forward with AI and part of our higher ed.
Awesome. Thank you again. And now I'm going to turn it over to Virtual Education Working Group Chair, Zach Reed, to kind of close today's presentation. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Hello, on behalf of N4A and its leadership, thank you, panelists, so much for taking the time to provide this valuable information and best practices for the membership. Also, a huge gratitude note for the moderators today. What an awesome team to facilitate this conversation. And finally, thanks to the Virtual Education Working Group for helping create this content, developing the idea, and producing this opportunity. Like Jenna mentioned, please save the date for January 18th at 9 a.m. Pacific or 12 noon Eastern for part 2 of this webinar. That's called Alternative Inspiration, Practical Applications of Artificial Intelligence in Student Athlete Support Services. You will not want to miss that chance to learn ways you, as practitioners, can implement some of the tools, improve your day-to-day with the mindful perspectives that were shared in today's discussion. Also, the YouTube recording of this webinar will be posted on the N4A Leadership YouTube channel, and that will get out to you as well. Finally, everyone, please take a moment to fill out the post survey that will come up at your screen at the conclusion of this webinar. And thank you so much again for taking the time to attend today. Have a great holiday season. Take care and give somebody a hug. That concludes the presentation.